Yesterday we finished the Gemara of Shabbat and we start the new one today of Eruvin. And so today we're on Eruvin Daf 2. For those of you who are reading below and see Daf 2 and say, wait a second, you just said we're starting today. Why aren't we on Daf 1? Because no Gemara starts with page 1. We always jump to page 2. There is no page 1 in any Gemara. I heard it said that lest one should think they've ever learned it in its entirety, we always start the Gemara on page 2, so you should always know, no, you've never ever covered any of these in perfect depth. So on Eruvin at Daf 2, there's an interesting question. We're talking about learning an Eruv. These are the certain foundations about what we can carry in on Shabbat, and we're learning from the measures of the temple exactly what dimensions we should be looking at for an Eruv. And people ask the question, so wait a second, how can we possibly be learning from the temple? We're looking at the Torah source. The Torah talks about where we can be carrying, where we can't. And the temple didn't exist in Torah times. The temple was built like 400 plus years after the Exodus for Egypt. The Torah had long since been written at the time of the temple. So how can we use the measurements of the temple to understand what the measurements are that we can create an Eruv out of? And the Gemara says, no. We didn't have the temple till hundreds of years later. That is true. But we did have the tabernacle, and the temple and the tabernacle, they're one. It's all one thing. We don't divide between the two. The measurements of the temple, we can look at that as giving us biblical measurements, because the temple, even though it didn't exist at the time, it was all one thing together with the tabernacle. One is just a continuation of the other. So whenever we look at the tabernacle in the desert and we look at the temple later on, realize we're not talking about one structure, the switching from one thing to another. There were differences, yes, but really in its essence and its holiness, in everything that we did there, they are the meeting place between us and God. It served the exact same purpose in both structures.